So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make the natural body lotion formulation. Before we get into formulating, make sure everything's clean, everything is sanitized. Even if you're selling this or not, you want to make sure everything is clean and hygienic. So here's the formulation. You can get this free on my blog. So the first phase is phase A, which is our distilled water and our humectant. I'm going to be using a total of 5% glycerin instead of splitting it up. So I'm actually going to leave the glycerin all to phase C. So all I have to do is just weigh out the distilled water. So I'm going to be weighing out 145.80 grams of distilled water. And I'm going to be using this wash bottle with distilled water. It's important that you use distilled water as it's going to be the cleanest. From using the wash bottle, I overshot it a little bit, which is totally fine. This is the only thing that is going to be in this phase. So I can actually take a pipette and get to the right amount. So I need 45.80. So now that I have this, I'm going to set it aside. Next, I'm going to get a small beaker so that I can have some extra distilled water to make up for the evaporation. So it's about 10 grams. It really doesn't have to be precise because we'll probably only even need a gram to make up the difference. And speaking of that, I might as well weigh out my whole water phase. So first I have the scale tarred or tarred. I've heard it said both ways. And then I'm going to let the balance get to that point. And then I'm going to write this down. And this is the weight that we are trying to get to. Note that depending on the beaker that you have, that this will vary, so don't go by my weight. Next is the oil phase. So this includes our emulsifier and our lipid. In the formulation, I included lipid of your choice. So you can do liquid oil, you can do a combination of liquid oils, you could even include a small amount of butter if you wanted to. It's very flexible and up to you what you want to add. So here's the emulsifier, and I'm going to weigh out 12 grams. So here's the emulsifier, and I'm going to weigh out 12 grams. And there's 12 grams of the emulsifier. For my liquid oil, I'm going to be using grapeseed oil. It's for a vegetable oil, it's quite lightweight, and it doesn't have a very long shelf life, so that's why I'm glad in this formulation I included vitamin E. So this will make sure that it will delay the oxidation of the oil. So I'm going to weigh out 30 grams of this. And there's 30 grams of grapeseed oil. So now that we've weighed out all of our ingredients, we have our oil phase, we have our water phase, and we have extra water for evaporation. We're going to move on to heating up the formulation so we can actually emulsify it. So today I'm going to be using actually a fondue pot for my water bath, and this is something I learned from Susan. She uses this as her water bath, and this is a great alternative instead of using a stove or a hot plate. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to set it up to boiling, and then put these in there. This holds a lot more than you would think. This is a 1 cup Pyrex measuring cup, and this is a 400 milliliter beaker. Unfortunately, this beaker that I was trying to use just tipped over, so I'm going to be using a 250 milliliter beaker. Okay, so I have them all in there, and then I put it on about 6.5, just to kind of see. This is actually the first time I'm using this, so kind of gauge. But what's extremely important, and what I see a lot of people don't do, is they do not use a thermometer, which I think is pretty insane. They're very inexpensive, and you can exactly know what your water temp is at, what your phases are at, because it's actually extremely important to know that everything is not only just melted but to the correct temperature. So I really encourage anyone to get $20 thermometer, instant read one, to be able to check the temperature. So it's advantageous to also wait out your cool down phase, because once the emulsion happens, everything kind of goes very quickly. So you can do your cool down phase. For the cool down phase, we are using a humectant and Euxyl P 9010. Euxyl P 9010 needs to be first solubilized in some sort of solvent like glycerin, propanediol, or propylene glycol. So it didn't take that long, and the water's already actually boiling. You can kind of see that there's bubbles forming on the bottom, and things are starting to melt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the oil phase to help it. So this is how much preservative is going in a 100-gram batch. And then to this I added 10 grams glycerin, so I'm not following the formulation I did on the blog because I'm doing all glycerin. But if you are using two different humectants, follow what I did on the blog. So now this can be set aside and we can focus on the water bath. So now I'm going to check the temperatures of these. The water bath keeps going like over boiling to nothing at all. So I'm kind of just watching it and seeing what it does. But I have my thermometer in degrees Celsius and we're aiming for 70 degrees. It's really important when taking the temperature that you're not actually touching the bottom of the glass, because then you're taking the temperature of the bottom of the glass and not the actual liquid. So we are well above that. So, oh yeah. So I'm going to turn it down and put a timer on for 20 minutes. Again, while that is heating up, I'm going to prepare my area. So I'm going to have my, just a coaster or something to insulate it. And then I prepped my scale as well, because heat can actually affect the scale a lot. So came with actually another scale that I'm using this for. And then the other thing I need to do is get my homogenizer ready. I'm going to be using a homogenizer for this formula. So for this emulsifier, I'm going to be pouring the water phase into the oil phase in a thin stream, and then I'm going to be blending it. I'm going to be using a homogenizer, which is right here. Homogenizers are really effective at making the particle size really small, so I will only need to blend it for 2 minutes. However, if you were using a stick blender, and I'll show you my stick blender, then you need to be blending it for 5 minutes. This is the stick blender that I've been using for ever since I've started formulating. This is my first piece of equipment that I ever bought, and it still has lasted me. So you can definitely use this and you will still get a stable emulsion. Homogenizer is just even better, and you don't have to blend it as long. Another thing I did want to show is the water level, and as you can see, it's above the actual level of where the oil is. It's same thing with the water, and this is really important so that your actual whole beakers are getting warm. If you're finding that things are not melting, you're not getting the right temperature, most of the time it's because you're not using enough water and you're not using high enough heat. Right now mine is at 3 and it keeps going in and out of being boiling and not, but I've been checking the temperature with the temperature gun and it has been fine. Okay, so 20 minutes has passed. I've checked the temperature. They are both actually above 70 degrees. So we're going to make sure that my scale is ready. I have my mat here, my homogenizers here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the water phase off first and I'm going to measure it. I was actually quite surprised. That's quite a bit of water, so I'm going to use the water that I already preheated and going to get it back up to the grams. And I need 93.2. And I need 93.2. Okay, so now I have my water phase. I'm going to take my oil phase off. They're both very hot. So now I'm going to pour the water into the oil. Thin stream. Okay, and then I'm going to blend this. This is after 2 minutes of blending, so at this point we just need to allow it to cool to below 40 degrees. So I've been cooling this lotion and I took the temperature and it's 39.6 degrees Celsius, which is totally fine for us to add the cool down phase. So the cool down phase consists of glycerin and our preservative, and then I have not weighed it out yet, but I need to add vitamin E, so I'm going to add that in now. And finally, I just need to add 0.2 grams of T50 tocopherol. And there's 0.2. Now we just need to mix this in. Now this formulation is actually a lot thicker than I thought it would be. It is 15% oil with 6% emulsifier and no additional thickeners. I think you should be able to pump this. I'm going to put it in a pump container, but you will see for sure a squeeze top bottle would for sure work for this. Thank you so much for following this tutorial. I hope you learned something in formulating stable emulsions. Of course, the method will vary a little bit into what phase you pour into what, how hot you need to get the water bath and things, but these are the principles that you should know to make stable emulsions.